I'm Jijun, Iron Valor's owner, most of you know, but today we have Andrew with us, so can you make a simple introduction of yourself?
My name is Andrew Cairns, I'm from Scotland. I am a BJJ black belt under Sean Stewart. I've been training combat sports for around 20 years now. I trained with the Scottish national wrestling team, I've done Muay Thai, done MMA, so fairly experienced in martial arts at this point now.
How was your experience training with the wrestling national team?
It was quite eye-opening to me. It was quite a different way of training from what I had experienced up until that point. So I think I was a purple belt in jiu-jitsu at the time when I started training there. So a reasonable amount of experience in grappling. But the way they conducted the classes was very different. A lot of strength and conditioning, which BJJ is kind of notorious for just neglecting that altogether. Yeah. The format of the classes was really different. We'd come in and we would just warm up by playing football, which is something I hadn't seen before. We'd come in just like a big soft football and we'd just kick it around for 10 minutes and that was your way of getting the blood flowing. So we had a Russian coach, which is maybe why there was such a big difference in training BJJ was mostly coached by Brazilians and then having a Russian coach for wrestling. So yeah, we just kick a ball around for 10 minutes, everyone would have a laugh. We would then just play some games and then we would wrestle, and that was pretty much it. It wasn't the kind of experience I'd had in BJJ where you did a very specific warm-up which was supposed to be sport specific, the kind of shrimping, crawling up and down the mat, and then being shown a specific technique and then sparring at the end. So it was an eye-opening experience. I think it was somewhat difficult at the time because I was so used to the format of BJJ classes that going to something else, it was challenging, but it was interesting to see how other sports were taught.
Okay, and in terms of intensity, I mean, you said Brazilian versus Russian coach. How have their intensity varies between the two different coaches?
I would say that training wrestling under a Russian coach was much more playful. I feel like BJJ has a very laid-back approach to it, but then when it comes to sparring, people can be really quite intense. I think with the coach that I had in wrestling, Vladimir, everything just felt quite playful. The wrestling rounds at the end of the day were taken seriously, but everything leading up to that was much more playful, I would say.
And when you say intensity, like how long does that intensity last? Like a few minutes, 10 minutes?
So wrestling is generally much more intense than BJJ. So most BJJ gyms will they'll do 5-minute rounds. Wrestling, you're normally wrestling for a maximum of 2 minutes at any one time. So the rounds themselves can be quite intense, but everything leading up to that was, again, quite playful. So yeah, intensity was quite high, but the volume's quite low. You're never wrestling for 10, 15 minutes at a time at high intensity.
I see. And did you have that sort of shifted how you train in jiu-jitsu?
I guess at the time I was quite focused on MMA, so I wasn't necessarily trying to take the wrestling mentality and bring it into BJJ, but I was trying to bring everything in together for MMA. And I think it was interesting to think about being more playful in your training, so that when you do have those occasions where you want to have more intense sparring, you're not burning yourself out before you get to that. It's not that every training session has to be super intense the whole time. You can pick and choose, and I think if the majority of your training is more playful, it does leave more in the tank for when you want to have those harder rounds or for competition, rather than burning yourself out in every training session. So one of the big differences as well is most people who were training BJJ are maybe training 2 or 3 evenings per week. When I was training with the national team, there were 2 training sessions per day. So you would train in the morning, you would train in the evening. You didn't have to go to every session. And then there was strength and conditioning actually attached to that as well. So you come in for your morning wrestling session and then you would go to the strength and conditioning. So you can't really have that super high intensity if you are training with that frequency.
I see. When you were trained with the national team in wrestling, were you still doing jiu-jitsu? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. What you said your focus then was MMA. How much time do you allocate to striking and grappling arts?
So, because I'm kind of going back a little bit in time, I feel like the landscape was slightly different then, where I think now we're really spoiled for choice with martial arts. Like you can go to a gym and it's like we only do BJJ here. In Scotland you go to gyms and it's like we only do no-gi here. Like it's not like you've got a mix of gi and no-gi. People have really like picked their niche and really went for it, and you can now just go all in on any one thing. Back when I started training, it was very much just everyone in together. You had one huge group of guys, and some of them preferred boxing or Muay Thai or BJJ or whatever it was, but everyone kind of just mixed in and trained together. So you weren't necessarily given an option to just do one thing, because there just wasn't enough of it.
I see.
So I was training striking probably 2-3 times a week, training BJJ probably 2-3 times a week, training wrestling probably most days at that point. So there was a lot of everything all mixed in together.
I see. And your experience as a mixed martial arts focus, does that change how you view martial arts as a sport, and how has that changed your grappling focus?
So my background in grappling was built at the same time as my background in MMA. So like I said, there wasn't really the option to just do BJJ when I started. So I think when you have that background where you're learning MMA and jiu-jitsu at the same time to complement each other, which I think back in the day that was very, very common, your grappling reflects that. Because you're very aware of the fact that, okay, well, I'm coming to a BJJ class and I'm learning spider guard, or I'm learning lasso, or a lot of stuff with lapels, and then you know that at some point in that week you're going to get in a cage with someone and they're going to be trying to punch you in the head, and when you try and do anything like that, it just doesn't translate. So you're constantly faced with the reality of how your grappling transfers to an MMA situation. So I think I like the fact that it focuses you on the reality of that if you want to do MMA. I think if you were to take someone who has done BJJ for years and years and years, try and transfer them across to MMA, they're going to bring all that stuff with them and have to learn what is worth keeping and what do you have to discard. I think if you're learning them both together, you just take what's needed there and then. But I think it's a very different skill set that's required for BJJ versus MMA. Again, as people have niched down into these specific things, they've just become so much more in depth. And I feel like now, if you want to be a successful BJJ competitor, there's so much you need to know, and it's so different from what it was in the past, where people could do MMA and BJJ and Muay Thai and kind of have, dipping into all those things a little bit. I feel like if you want to be successful in any of those things now, you really have to be specifically focused on those things. Even the difference between no-gi and gi, it used to be that the best guys in the world would compete in both, and I feel like you see less and less of that now because they are so much more specific now.
When do you start just focusing primarily on jiu-jitsu then?
So I'd say probably around 10 years ago now.
Okay.
I always felt more drawn towards jiu-jitsu than striking. Striking something that I did because I wanted to be able to do MMA. I thought it was important to know how to strike, but I never had a love for it or an affinity for it. Whereas right from the start, jiu-jitsu was something that I really loved, and I knew it's something that I could probably do for a very long time. I feel like your ability to continue to grapple lasts way longer than your ability to be sparring all the time, especially when you come from a background where the sparring is maybe quite hard. You know that there's a short time span on that. So yeah, probably around 10 years ago now, I made the focus to just be grappling oriented.
And well, I know that you use ecological approach in your jiu-jitsu, but the viewers may not know. Can you give a basic description of what ecological approach means and how does it look like?
Yeah, so I think the ecological approach, which I know that some people are kind of moving away from that terminology now. So ecological dynamics is it's a way of understanding how people or organisms move, how they learn to move. The practical application of that is the constraints-led approach. So basically, rather than taking a student and telling them exactly what they should do, you create a situation in which the student can explore the environment and find a solution. So rather than being really focused on how you want them to get somewhere, you give them the destination and then they find their own way there. So you can then use constraints to help get them there, but you're not explicitly telling them exactly how they should get there. I have found, since using this approach, I just love the ideas that students come up with. I feel like you give people this freedom and they'll find things that you would never have thought of on your own. I think generally in jiu-jitsu, we have this idea of a coach where the coach has the answer and then they transfer that to the student. And I think it's quite limiting. You can only ever know what your coach knows, like they will pass that on to you, and what they know is going to be the right answer for you. I think when we allow students to discover things for themselves and explore and have fun, I think they enjoy it more, and I think they get much better much quicker as well. I feel like it's a win-win situation.
And you said previously you had a jiu-jitsu coach that is Brazilian, so obviously that's a more traditional way. Who sort of bring you on into this new or this approach?
So I would say that my first exposure to it was when I was wrestling, because it wasn't exactly CLA we were doing, but looking back on it now, it was much closer to CLA than what I had been doing in BJJ. I think seeing how high-level wrestlers were being much more playful and not necessarily being hyper-focused on the specifics of a technique was really, again, eye-opening to me. I had a certain expectation going in, like, okay, this is a super high-level coach, so what's going to happen is he's going to give me all the little details that I need to be a successful wrestler. And really, this super high-level coach was just creating a training environment where you could come in and play and explore. And I certainly felt my wrestling get better and better, but I didn't necessarily understand why at the time. It almost didn't make sense to me. I was thinking, okay, he's not giving me any techniques, but I'm becoming better at wrestling. And I couldn't really, sort those things out in my head. And then I was coaching at the club that I used to train with in Scotland, and I started running classes which were only based around positional sparring. So I was showing no techniques in these classes. This was maybe 7-8 years ago. I just had guys start, we're going to be escaping from the back, we're going to be escaping from mount. It's a pretty common thing that happens. But having the classes focused just on that, so 1 hour of only positional sparring, it felt in a very short period of time people were getting much better. And it made me realise that it's your time on the mat grappling against a resisting opponent which increases your skill in grappling. It's not really your ability to explain a technique to someone. It's whether or not you can actually achieve a goal. So you give someone a really simple goal, like get out from the back, escape from mount, pass the guard. I feel like you just get so much more value out of that. So seeing that firsthand, so this was before the kind of language of ecological dynamics or CLA had come out, but just seeing how much more people were getting out of a practical-based class rather than a somewhat theoretical class, that kind of led me down that path of realising that there must be a better way of coaching, there must be a way that we can actually help people develop skill.
Had you figured out this? What CLA actually stands for?
CLA, constraints-led approach.
Okay.
So it's basically you give someone a set of constraints that they have to work within, and then they just play and explore in that area to try and achieve an objective that you've given them.
Did you eventually found another jiu-jitsu coach like that, or you kind of figure out your own way?
So no, there are a lot of people doing that now, and the biggest name in that space is Greg Souders, who I think a lot of people have taken a lot of cues from him. But in terms of people who are actually doing it, I didn't really learn it from any specific person, but I feel like it's something that I've tried to apply to my own learning for quite a long time. So you can go to open mat and you can do these things. So I stopped going to jiu-jitsu classes a really long time ago because I found I didn't really feel like I was getting that much out of them. I feel like I could go in, spend an hour or 90 minutes in a class and come away and be like, oh, well, it was the 20 minutes of sparring at the end was good, but the 20 minutes of warm-up and the hour of technique or whatever it was didn't really feel as if it was transferring across to skill on the mat, whereas just getting time, particularly being able to train against high-level training partners, that is where I think the skill development was really coming. So I started just focusing on just training with good guys as often as possible.
Do you find this approach as a coach works better for people who have more experience or completely new, or it doesn't really matter?
I feel like it can work really well for either, but it's particularly useful, I think, with new people. I think it can work well with either because it really closes the gap in experience. I feel like you can have a higher level player and a lower level player or more and less experienced, and you can have them train together through these games and they can both get something out of it. But I find that when people are more experienced in jiu-jitsu, they tend to be more likely to get in their own way. They do what they think they're supposed to do. Like, coming to Malaysia, there are a lot of people who've grappled for a very, very long time. So maybe, meet someone who's, a purple belt or brown belt, trained for over a decade, and then you're introducing a new way of training, but the old way of training is just so ingrained in them, and the positions that they know are so ingrained in them, and the movement patterns that they already have, that when you try and kind of take away that entire foundation of what they think a grappling class is supposed to be, sometimes that they can struggle, and it's certainly more challenging when you have people who are very experienced. Whereas having people in who it's maybe their first ever grappling class, or they maybe had a couple of months of experience, you kind of present them with these games or these scenarios and they just do exactly what you ask because they have no preconceived notion of what it is they're supposed to be doing. And I find that their rate of progression is just super fast.
How would you find yourself teaching someone who is new and probably don't understand how they should move or efficient movement? How would you bridge that across without telling them what to do?
So I think there's the idea of efficient movement, I think can only be built on top of skill. And I think skill can only be developed by trying to achieve a clearly defined goal. So to kind of clarify what I mean there, if I have a brand new student and they ask me what is the best way to get from A to B, there's no such thing as a correct answer for that. It's going to be different for every student. I think that people are often looking for an answer because it feels like it's going to be easier, but I feel like when you give a student an answer, it actually holds them back, because what happens is I'm going to take my own idea of what you should do in this specific situation, and it might be different from another black belt and another black belt and another black belt. You've got, everyone has their own opinion. I tell you, when you're in this situation, here's the answer. You then become hyper focused on that, and everything else around about that, you become blinded to that, and there may be a much better answer there, and you're never going to find it because you become fixated on the thing that you've been given. I think this is people will come in and but I was taught this move. You see them trying that move and you watch them spar and you think there are so many other things you could be doing right now that would be simpler, better, more efficient. But because you're focused on the thing that you think is the right answer, you become blinded to those other things. So I don't believe that there is a most efficient way to do anything. I think it's just what is best in the moment, and that changes from moment to moment. Which kind of sounds a bit woo, but I genuinely believe that.
What does this approach produce that probably traditional teaching wouldn't teach in that sense?
So I think that So I've said that this is called the constraints-led approach, right? I think that it's a bit of a misnomer. I think that traditional teaching is actually very, very constrained, and the constraints-led approach is actually much more expansive. So if, say for example, I want to teach you how to do an armbar from closed guard, if I tell you, okay, you have to take a certain grip on the arm, move it across here, control the shoulder, bring the person down, move your hips, I'm basically laying out for you exactly what you're supposed to do. And then the idea is that everything that is not that is not allowed. So really the constraints in that style of teaching are massive. I'm constraining everything except for these 5 specific things that you're allowed to do, and you have to do them in the order that I told you to do them. That's the most constrained thing I can think of. It's like dead training.
Right.
So when we use the constraints-led approach, we give you an area to explore, and we basically say, I want you to get from here to here. I give you a clear objective. You're trying to get on this person's back, you're trying to get a chest-to-chest connection, you're trying to get past their knees, whatever it is, something that a 7-year-old can understand, and then I tell you, okay, go. And you find your own way to do it. So I feel like it's a really open space for you to explore, so it's considerably less constrained than what we have in traditional drilling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and is there bad habits? And if so, how does that happen, and how would you coach out of it?
So there certainly can be bad habits. I think bad habits would be things that you do in a small game that if you then transferred it to the bigger game of jiu-jitsu would not be effective. And I think that comes down to coaching skill. So if you see someone who's doing something again and again that you think, okay, this is not going to work if we take this to a jiu-jitsu match, you can then either say that's not allowed. So say you have a student they keep doing the same thing, like they maybe put both their hands on the floor continuously during a game because they're trying to stop their legs being lifted.
Right.
So you can just say, okay guys, we're going to play the game again, this time you're not allowed to put your hands on the floor. So that would be just taking that away, so constraining it. Or my preference is to make the action that you don't like punishable. So again, if we had this game where one partner's trying to put the other one on their back, and they keep putting their hands down to defend. Okay, so what would actually happen if you do that in a grappling match? Well, there's very easy access to a body lock. So if I see that happening again and again, I'll just say, okay, next time we play this, the top player, if they manage to get a body lock, they win. So now you can still do the thing you were doing, but it's now punishable. It's now the other person can win if you do this, which brings it closer to the reality of a grappling match. So, but again, that's adding more things into the game rather than taking them away. So again, this constraints-led approach, we're actually unconstraining some things in order to open the game up to make it closer to a competitive environment for jiu-jitsu.
Okay. You said previously with the strength training in the wrestling situation, has that strength training method or the kind of strength training that you have done there, how has it translated into jiu-jitsu, and what were you doing back then that you're still kind of doing now?
So I think a lot of it was very conditioning focused when I was doing wrestling, and I think that over the years my opinions on strength and conditioning have really, really changed. And I think listening to a lot of people who are in jiu-jitsu and have been for a long time, it seems like a lot of people have the same experience where they start off thinking that strength and conditioning is not important, and then as it gets later and later into their career, they realise that strength and conditioning is actually the thing that keeps you on the mat. But there's a fine balance that you have to strike. I think some people take it too far, where they just are constantly worried about lifting more and more weight, and they're basically treating themselves like a power lifter. And then there are people who are just doing endless cardio, and I think that finding a balanced approach so that your strength and conditioning is a nice supplement to your jiu-jitsu, and you stay on the mat longer, you stay healthier for longer. I think that's really where most people land after years and years of probably going too far one way and too far the other way. We've all went through phases where it's like, I want to be a power lifter, or I'm going to do endless cardio, or whatever it is. I think just keeping it balanced, keeping it in perspective, a couple of sessions a week of strength and conditioning, nothing super heavy. You can lift heavy, there should be intensity there, but not, you know, aiming for 1 rep maxes in your deadlift and stuff like that. It's a good supplement so that you can stay on the mat for longer.
And the age-old question, sport-specific SNCs or just general strength training? What
I would say general, because I am skeptical about whether there is such a thing as sport-specific. It's maybe like a slightly deeper debate, but I think the idea of doing things that are super sport specific, I don't think they have the transfer, or it's not that they're not effective, it's just that when you think about how much time you have, they just don't give the same amount of benefit for the same amount of effort. So if you're only doing 2 sessions of strength and conditioning per week, I think it should be the stuff that's going to give you the most. So just making sure that you're actually getting stronger, you're training with enough intensity, that you're going to have some kind of adaptive change in the body where your bone density is getting stronger, you're actually growing some muscle, your connective tissues are becoming stronger. You have to push past a certain level of intensity to get to that. You have to have an effective training load. And I feel like a lot of the sport specific stuff, it's so sport specific as to not give you that transfer where you're getting the benefits of you know, better muscle and bone density, but it's not sport specific enough that it's actually going to make you better at your sport. I feel like it's this middle ground which doesn't really do anything particularly well. I feel like if you just train for strength and then do your sport, the sport specific stuff kind of takes care of itself to a certain extent.
I see. And intensity wise, like 1 to 10, how intense should an SNC be? Regardless of whatever movement it is, but in overall sort of intensity, how would you?
So my personal belief when it comes to strength and conditioning is that your intensity should be really high, but your volume should be really low. I think that if you want a bit of hypertrophy, you want a bit of strength gains, you want your body to actually adapt, you have to be lifting heavy enough for that. I think contrary to what a lot of people would say around BJJ, you probably want to be doing quite stable movements as well, which is going to allow you to put enough intensity into your body with a lowered risk of injury. So I would say intensity should generally be quite high, volume should generally be quite low. I see people doing, you know, really big sets of 15, 20 reps, and then they're doing, you know, 5 sets of that, and I feel like that's just too much volume. You're going to see that showing up on the mat because you're going to feel beat up all the time. I feel like I don't ever do more than 2 sets of any one lift. I try to not go above like 8 reps, and I try and keep the intensity quite high so that I'm getting close to failure by the end of that 8th rep. But that's kind of where I've landed after years and years of trying a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like Dorian Yates' system.
Yeah.
Okay, and what are the common injury in jiu-jitsu, and what are the preventions to it?
So if you're training in the gi, the most common injuries are injuries to the fingers and the hands. People put a lot of strain on their own hands by holding on to grips that they should probably just let go of. Your grip will get stronger if you do jiu-jitsu, but it takes quite a long time. I feel like the best prevention for these injuries is to just not put yourself in a situation where you're gripping something for dear life while someone tries to pull it really hard. If we're using pocket grips on the gi, we're going to strain our fingers. It's the same when you see people doing climbing, like they injure their fingers. It's a lot of strain to put through these through your fingers.
Yeah.
That's the most common one in the gi. No gi, I feel like most people you speak to who have trained jiu-jitsu for long enough have maybe had 1 or 2 really big injuries. It's actually not as dangerous a sport as people would think in terms of the injuries that you get, but every now and again you'll have a very big injury, which is just the nature of contact sports. It's the same in football, it's the same in rugby.
Yeah.
When you have bodies hitting against each other, there's always the potential where a falling weight. So knees are a big one, shoulders are a big one. Basically any joint that is supposed to have stability in it, like your knees, when they get twisted, when weight falls onto them. So injuries from falling weight are a big one. And I think the key to prevention there is to set up a good culture in the gym. It's not necessarily what you're going to do yourself in the S&C room. It's more to do with having good training partners, having a good culture in the gym where people aren't being reckless and dangerous. I feel like going into gyms that have too much of a competitive mentality, where people are just sparring super hard all the time, you can certainly do that, but it has to be appropriate to the level of both players. When people are super focused on winning and they're thinking about that more than thinking about the health and safety of their partners, that's when people get injured. So yeah, the best prevention is a good gym culture.
I see. And joint health. Is there anything a grappler could do to strengthen it, or is it just through exposure?
I think that you'll constantly see ads for different tools and different supplements and things that are supposed to help with your joints and your tendons, and I think that just exposure over time. I think if you have enough training intensity over a long enough duration, you will have that adaptation. I don't think there's a shortcut towards that. Tendons, like it takes so long for these things to actually make adaptations. It's not like your muscles. You can go to the gym and after 3-4 months you can actually see a change in someone. If they've never lifted weights before, they start a weightlifting program, you see it in a reasonably short period of time. Our tendons are just not the same as that. I feel like we get to that point of being really robust over years rather than weeks and months. You'll probably notice yourself that when you start grappling against someone who's grappled for a very long time, they normally feel like they have thick wrists, big hands. Like that's not something you get from like 6 months of jiu-jitsu. That's something you get from 10 plus years of jiu-jitsu. So you have to be in it for the long haul. And the thing that lets you get to that point is just managing your injury risk, managing your training intensity. The guys who come in and try super hard for the first 3-4 months, burn themselves out, get injured, and then they leave the gym and never come back. It's the guys who just train at a good intensity, a good pace for a really, really long time, that 10 years from the point they start, they're actually super strong, super robust.
What is your definition of good intensity then?
So I would say training, you have to train hard enough that you feel resistance. So it's obviously it's a combat sport. We have to be able to physically control another human being, which is, by definition, it's always going to require some strength. But if you get to the end of a round and you can't explain what happened during that round, you were probably training at too high an intensity. So that's something that I like to use to measure intensity is, if you can have a discussion about the round you've just done and you actually are aware of what was happening, it's a good indication that you were actually still in your head while you were doing it. And I think looking at your heart rate and your breathing rate's more obvious. So if you get to the end of a 5-minute round and you're breathing really, really hard, or if 90 seconds into the round you're breathing really hard, or you find yourself constantly looking at the timer in the gym, like, oh my, how much longer is left in this, you're probably at too high an intensity. It can be fun to do that. Like, we've all done that. Like, we've had these super hard rounds. It's great. It's good fun. But it's thinking about, well, how many rounds am I going to get in today? How many rounds am I going to get in this week? How many rounds am I going to get in this month? And if your intensity is so high in those rounds that you don't want to train the next day, or maybe even 2 or 3 days later, your overall volume is going to be super low. You might only be training, 2-3 times per week. I say that as low volume because I train all the time, but I know for most people that's an aspiration for some people. But yeah, if you can be on the mat every day, like the guy who I got my black belt from, Shawnee, he's a world class competitor. He's so good at jiu-jitsu, but he's so just fun and playful to roll with. Like, he's not trying to smash it every time, even though he could. But he's on the mats every single day, and that's why he's so good. He trains in the morning, he trains at night, he trains at the weekend. He'll compete against like an international level black belt on Saturday night, and then he'll be back in the gym on Sunday morning for open mat. He just trains all the time. And then people wonder, how is this guy so good? And it's because of that. It's because he's just constantly doing jiu-jitsu. And the only way you can do that is by managing your intensity. It also helps that he's much better than everyone else, so he can roll quickly. If you're not very good, you sometimes feel as if you have to roll that little bit harder to make up for that lack of skill. But yeah, when you're a super high level black belt, it's a little bit easier to manage your intensity, I think.
And how would that translate into someone who is preparing for a competition, for instance?
So I think that the only real difference between your day-to-day training and your competition training is that, are you trying to acquire new skills, or are you trying to hone the skills that you already have? So if you have a competition in 2 weeks' time, it's probably not the best time to be adding something new to your game. I would say focusing on what you're already good at, knowing what your A game is. Like if you have a particular position you feel you're very strong at, just finding ways to get there, trying to funnel your game towards that. If you don't have any competitions coming up and you're just generally training, then that's a really good time to be exploring new options. So like I say, I like every training session to have some degree of exploration in it. So even if you're in a position that you know quite well, try and figure out new ways to move inside that position, try and find new things that can be effective in that position. So yeah, it's just a difference in your mentality, I think. Trying to be focused on what you're good at versus do you want to be exploring and trying to find new things.
And in terms of intensity wise, as you said, you probably need to be cognizant of what you're doing, but sometimes training for competition requires a bit higher intensity. Do you find you have to train for that intensity usually, or you just have to do true S&Cs kind of?
So I think for people doing their first ever grappling tournament, they'll probably be surprised by the intensity, especially if you're going into a white belt bracket. You're maybe competing against other people who are, relatively new to it. Adrenaline is going to kick in. You're going to feel like the other person is trying to murder you. You're going to almost like get that panic setting in. I feel like that just goes away after a certain amount of competition experience. Competition is a skill in the same way that anything else is. And again, to go back to Shawnee, he competes all the time, which is probably one of the reasons why he's so good at it. I listened to an interview with Dara O'Connell, the Irish BJJ coach, and he was saying, and I really liked this when he said it, if you want to be very good as a competitor at jiu-jitsu, his advice would be like, try and do 50 competitions within the next 3 months. Like just go everywhere in the world that you can, obviously budget allowing. Like if you could compete 50 times in the next 3 months, you would be significantly better as a competitor if you did nothing else other than that. So I don't think that you have to change what you do in the training room to prepare for competition. I think you just have to compete a lot.
I see. Okay, interesting. And leading into thoughts on self-study through the CLA system, is there a thing as self-study? Because traditional method of teaching jiu-jitsu would be looking at instructionals and sort of learning from someone who is like John Danaher, for instance. How does that happen, or how would that look like in the CLA method?
So I think self-study is an interesting topic because I feel like everyone should be doing self-study in jiu-jitsu. I feel like you have to have some degree of responsibility for your own progress. Now obviously you want to be able to just show up at the gym, do whatever you're told by the instructor and get better. But if you have a group of 15 people in the gym, there's only so much that can be tailored to you. And I think CLA helps that a lot more because it's not super focused on this is the exact technique. It gives people freedom to explore. But when I think of self-study, I think people have it backwards. So getting like a John Danaher instructional or a Gordon Ryan instructional or whoever it is, the idea that you're going to watch this instructional and then show up at the gym and then apply those things that you learned, I don't think that really works. And I've tried to do it a lot myself. You sit and watch an 8-hour instructional and think you're going to download that into your brain and then suddenly like you're going to be amazing at whatever the topic was. I think self-study, you should study yourself. Like look at what is happening when you're on the mat. I keep getting my guard passed. Why? Okay, well I keep having my knees put together when I'm on my side or whatever it is. Like look at what's happening when you do jiu-jitsu and then try and find an answer for that. Like you want to identify a problem and then try and find solutions for that problem. And you can find that by just exploration on the mat, you can maybe go find other people who have already solved that problem for themselves and see if you can take inspiration from that. But I think self-study, again, should be looking at your own game, thinking about what's really going to help your game, and then going and finding those things that fit into that slot, rather than watching an 8-hour instructional and hoping that that's going to have some sort of transfer across to your own game, because I don't think it does. I would also say that there's a very big difference between skill and knowledge. You might watch one of these long instructionals and be able to demonstrate 20 new moves that you've seen in it, but if you can't actually do those things against a resistant opponent, then you have knowledge without having skill. And I feel like that's where a lot of people fall into this trap. You can talk about jiu-jitsu a lot, they can tell you what this position is, and they can tell you what you're supposed to do from this position, and then you roll against them and it's like, oh, this person still has a lot of fundamentals they have to work on before any of this even becomes applicable.
Would you say the only self-studied in the CLA method would be to show up on the mats?
No, I wouldn't say that. Again, like, I think you have to know your own game in order to be able to benefit from watching someone else's game. Like, if you can have genuine self-reflection, figure out what's actually going wrong, figure out where the biggest holes are in your own game, then absolutely go and watch what other people are doing. Ask a coach what they would do in this scenario. It's not to say that there's no room for inputs. There certainly are, but I feel like if we just take a bunch of random inputs, so we saw a technique in class, we saw a technique on Instagram, we watched an instructional, it's all just going to hit you and bounce back off again. None of that is developing skill. If we look at our own game and we can identify what is going wrong, then what we learn to fill that hole is going to instantly improve us as a grappler. It probably looks as if I have like strong hands and strong wrists and stuff like that. That's not natural. That's from years and years of grappling.
Wow.
So yeah, I actually was supposed to go on an outward bound thing with the first company I worked for when I was an apprentice. I had to cancel it because my wrists were so bad. Like I struggled to pick up like a cup of tea in the morning. Like I had such, this is before I did any martial arts.
Wow.
I think part of it is from so much drumming when I was a teenager. So I was putting a lot of strain through my wrists, and I ended up with what they thought was like carpal tunnel syndrome, or basically, I would wake up in the morning, my hands barely worked.
Oh wow, insane. But since when do you start growing that?
I get like, it's not something I ever tried to do or intended to do, it just happened. And I remember being in work when I was back in Scotland, when I was working as an engineer, one of the guys in the squad saying like, you've got really big hands, and like just being like, oh, have I? Like, and now like my wife says it as well, like I'm more aware of it now, but I never used to have big hands, and I never used to have thick wrists, but they've become bigger and thicker over time just by grabbing things all the time. So
good to know that this had become something bigger.
Yeah.
Because I always have like sort of thin midsection, even like for some reason I have large joints but thin midsection for most of my parts, even my ankle too. So yeah, good to know that this could actually go bigger.
I would say like load bearing through the joints is a really big thing.
Okay.
So that's what, like, a lot of time doing calisthenics, like just doing. So when I did start jiu-jitsu, like we would do a lot of push-ups and stuff like that. Like it's not like now where people don't do any strength and conditioning at all. Like we were just kind of learning from really old methods, and it was all guys who were into like Bruce Lee movies and stuff like that. So it was just part and parcel of what we did, that we did like a ton of push-ups and sit-ups and all this stuff. So quite old school. But I believe that does have a transfer. So I think if you do a lot of push-ups, if you learn how to walk on your hands. I used to do handstand push-ups every single day for years and years. Like eventually your wrists just adapt to being used like ankles.
I still couldn't do a handstand push-up. Muscularity I probably can. Just, fear is one of it. And I I never really spent much time on it, I guess.
That's what I mean. Like it's something that just over time you will gradually get to it. If you feel like if you were to do it right now and it would maybe like hurt your wrists, then it just takes a long time to build up to it. In the same way that if you wanted to become like a calisthenics athlete, it just takes so long to get into these things. But it happens for everyone. It's just time in the game.
And leading back into our topic, what does it take to be a black belt? This is from YC.
From YC, okay. I think it really depends on what type of black belt you are. I don't think that being a black, like it's not a monolith. There are different types of black belts. I think that people who are too focused on becoming a black belt, sometimes that can lead you away from the right way to become a black belt. I think if you're genuinely focused on the thing I was speaking about earlier, which is that self-reflection, if you constantly look at your own game and try and identify what is wrong with it, and you just keep plugging holes, eventually you'll become a black belt.
Okay.
So that's, in the technical sense, that's what it takes. Constantly looking at what you're doing, identifying how it could be better, and then improving. In terms of overall mentality or overall approach, it's just people who do it for long enough as well. It's, if you love being on the mat, that's the easiest way to become a black belt. If you find yourself, oh well, I could go to jiu-jitsu tonight, or I could also go to pickleball, or I could just spend the evening in the house, like, I think it's hard to take someone who has that mentality towards jiu-jitsu and have them become a black belt, because it does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. And if you don't love it, I feel like it would be hard to get there. But for the guys who, and I'm sure you know guys like this, they just want to be doing jiu-jitsu all the time. Like, it's what they look forward to every day. Maybe have an office job, they're stressed, and they know that the hour that they have on the mat at the end of the day is going to be the thing that puts their head back into the right space. Like, these guys become black belts because these are guys who, they kind of need jiu-jitsu. I think that's the differentiator.
Is this just a matter of time in that sense?
So it certainly can be, and that's when I say, like, it depends what type of black belt you want to be, because I'm well aware of people who they're given their black belt because they have trained for a certain amount of time, and it's not necessarily reflective of the skill that they've developed, or anyone can get to that. But I think that it depends on your training environment. There are some gyms that you go to and they would never dream of doing that. They will only give you your black belt if they think you've learned the skills that are required to be a black belt. So if you're in a gym that just gives belts out for time, then anyone can get a black belt. But I think if you want to have a skill-based black belt, which is really a reflection of the time and the effort that you've put in and the skill that you've achieved, then yeah, it's not everyone's going to get there, but everyone can get there if they just have that correct attitude.
And in your mind, do you have sort of a map of how a blue belt should look like, how a purple belt, a brown belt, a black belt should look like?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of mysticism in jiu-jitsu around the belts, and I feel like that's a problem. I feel like it's something that should actually be addressed. I've spoken to so many people who they will speak to their coach and they'll say, what's it going to take for me to get the next belt? And there's just never a good answer. It's always just keep showing up, and then at some point the black belt who's running the place just decides for some reason this person is now a new belt. And it's, when you have places like this, it feels like there's a lot of inconsistency, and people, they're not really sure what is required to get there. I think if you have a clear idea of what skills you want someone to have at each belt level, then it's much easier to help your students get to that. If a student comes to me and they say, what does it take for me to go from blue belt to purple belt? If I can't articulate that, then how am I supposed to help them get there? Like, my job as an instructor or a coach is to help someone progress within the sport. If I can't tell them how I want them to progress to the next level, then I don't think that I can be very good at my job. So for me, the skills are actually much the same. To go from a white belt to a blue belt, it's roughly the same skills as going from a brown belt to a black belt. It's just that you have to be able to do it against more skilled opponents. I think if you look at your cohort, if you look at all the other white belts in the gym, and you can do the core parts of jiu-jitsu, which are taking people down, passing people's guard, pinning people, escaping from the bottom. Like these are fundamental things that a white belt should have to learn to become a blue belt. If you can't do those things, then you're probably not going to get your blue belt. But it's the same skill set to go from a brown belt to a black belt. You just have to be able to do it at a higher level against better people.
And I know we talked about this previously, but what are your tenets, your 5 tenets of creating the CLA methods?
Yeah, so when I'm developing a class, when I'm trying to plan what to do in a class, there are really 5 different roles that you can be playing in jiu-jitsu at any one time. So you can be wrestling, you can be passing the guard, you can be playing guard, you can be pinning, or you can be escaping. So broadly speaking, those are the 5 kind of main roles or domains within jiu-jitsu. And then when we're in one of those domains, really what are we trying to do? We're trying to either make connection to the other player, we're trying to maintain connection, we're trying to progress to a new position, or we're trying to finish from there. So if we look at these 5 different domains and these 4 different main priorities within those domains, I think that covers most of what you're going to see on a mat at any one time. So I think people really overcomplicate it and they get really detailed. Okay, well, we're working on X guard today and it's going to be this specific sweep from X guard and it's going to be transitioning to this other guard. I think that if we keep jiu-jitsu really simple, you can help people progress through it much quicker. If we get people too focused on small details when they can't do very basic fundamental things, I feel like it does them a disservice. And again, they end up too focused on things that are not necessarily going to help them in the moment. Whereas if we keep things broad enough and general enough, I think that people have a much easier time of taking that information on board and then learning how to apply that.
How would you coach from someone who doesn't know anything to being competent in a full round of jiu-jitsu from standing all the way to submission? So I think if we try and look at this as CLA, and how do you get someone from no experience of grappling whatsoever to becoming a competent grappler who can go through a full game of jiu-jitsu, if we compare that to what has been happening for years and years in jiu-jitsu, where we take someone and we show them moves and then we expect them to get to competence, I think the pathway is so much shorter when we play games. So if you come in and we develop a game where we're going to be wrestling in this game, so we're just learning how to make connections. So this is one of the games that we play here quite a lot, learning how to make connections when we're on the feet, and then we learn how to finish a takedown. So that might be something like we're going to start with our hands underneath our partner's hips and we're going to try and get them to the mat. And then we might play a game where we have to get past our partner's knees, and then we might play a game where we have to try and hold them down once we get there, and then we play a game that we're going to try and finish like an arm triangle. Every one of those steps, you learn genuine skills as opposed to just knowledge of these things. So you can take someone and within an hour class, you could have exposed them to every part of jiu-jitsu. So they could have been exposed to wrestling, to takedowns, well, that's wrestling, passing, pinning, escaping, guard. So within a very short period of time, you can then have someone spar and they're not going to feel lost in these positions, or certainly feel less lost than someone who spent 3 weeks of a beginner's program learning about half guard. Like how long does it take to get to the point where you can spar comfortably? If you're going to break jiu-jitsu down into these tiny little segments and say we're spending an entire week and all we're looking at is butterfly half guard, and then next week we're looking at another tiny little slice of it, how long does it take until you've learned something from the feet and something from pass it? Like it's like this endless cycle of constantly trying to add these tiny pieces in. And this is why I think when we have these much bigger pieces, we get to competency much quicker. And you can always focus on details much later, but you add those details on top of a strong foundation, as opposed to trying to build a foundation out of thousands of tiny parts. Okay. Let me see if there's any more questions. Oh, I think I should probably ask this question just now. But going back to the black belt question, what's a serious white belt should be doing today that has nothing to do with technique?
Something a white belt should be doing today that has nothing to do with technique. If you're a white belt in jiu-jitsu, you want to get better that's not technique based, I would say what we were talking about earlier, again, self-reflection. I feel like that's such a huge part of development, and you identify it in students quite quickly, because students who self-reflect always have good questions. They ask you something where you give them an answer and you know that the answer you're giving them is going to slot directly into their game. You know that they have looked at their own game, they've had an honest appraisal of it, and they've identified something that they're not sure about or they want clarification on. It's nice to see that in students, and you can normally tell quite early on that, okay, this person's going to probably develop quite well within the sport, because you can tell that their mentality is that they're being honest with themselves. I think that's, yeah, if you're a serious white belt, looking at your own game and trying to understand what's going on is probably the biggest thing you can do. Or steroids.
Or being autistic.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay, for someone curious about jiu-jitsu but keep putting it off, what do you tell them?
I think if someone is already curious about jiu-jitsu, it means they're aware of jiu-jitsu, right? And I think if you're aware of it, then the only thing you can do is just go to a gym and try it out. If you think it's something you would enjoy, just go and try it. The hardest thing is always getting through the door on the first day. I think once you've done that, you'll find, like, I've trained all over the world, trained lots of different places for a very long time. Jiu-jitsu gyms are generally the same everywhere you go, in that they are friendly, welcoming places with people who have built a good community there. They have fun. Like, the sport wouldn't be as big as it is if it wasn't a nice, fun place for people to go. So if you're interested in it, if you're aware of jiu-jitsu and you think it's something you might like, then I would say just go. Like, everything will be taken care of once you get through the front door. That's the only thing you have to do, and then everything becomes easy after that.
Is there a difference between, I mean, you have been to quite a few gyms in your life. Has there been, like, what's the difference, would you say, between a very competitive gym versus, wow, most gyms in that sense?
So I've trained with some very, very high level competitors, but I don't think that there's a tension between a high level competitive gym and a kind of family friendly gym in terms of the attitude of the people in there. I think there's this idea that if you go to a competitive gym that creates a lot of high level competitors, that the sparring is going to be really, really hard, and I don't think that's the case, because I think people who are smart enough to do well in competition are too smart to train too hard, if that makes sense. Like, if I go back to baseline jiu-jitsu, Shawnee's place, like, again, one of the highest level competitors to ever come out of the UK, and it's just the friendliest place. Like, there's people there with their kids. There's no tension between a competitive gym and a family friendly gym if it's done right. I think if you go into a place and it feels like people are mean and they're like trying to hurt each other when they're rolling, that's just a shit gym. Like, just don't go there. Like, it doesn't make them competitive. It's probably in the long run going to make them less competitive in terms of jiu-jitsu and in terms of a business. Like, why would you go to a business if the vibe isn't good? Like, you're spending so much time there. It should be a nice place that you want to be.
Yeah, true. Okay. Most common mistakes beginner makes in their first 6 months in jiu-jitsu, obviously.
Intensity. There's a reason that people that there are memes about spazzy white belts. It's people come in and they think that they're in a fight. They think that they have to go really, really hard in order to be effective, and most people learn pretty quickly, like, don't do that, because you're not going to enjoy your experience. The people that you're sparring with are certainly not going to enjoy their experience. So yeah, I would say just adjusting your intensity, treating it the same way that you would treat any other art that you're trying to learn. Like, you don't learn to draw a picture by drawing harder. Like, like, it doesn't help. You're trying to develop a skill. So yeah, just blind intensity is the biggest mistake that a lot of white belts make.
And how does that change? How would that white belt lower their intensity?
So that's where gym culture again becomes a really big thing. I think when people go to a gym and they look at the upper belts and they take their cues from those people, culture is top down in a gym. If you see the black belts and the brown belts and the purple belts rolling in a what I would call without being competitive, you're not collaborating on the role, but you're certainly not trying to make the role really difficult or unpleasant for your partner. I think once you see that, once you've rolled with a black belt or a brown belt and you realise that this person's not trying to smash you, they're trying to get something out of it while you get something out of it, you pick that up and you take that into your own game and you realise that that's actually how you get better at jiu-jitsu. So yeah, it's very much top down. If you go into a place and there's black belts who are smashing white belts, then I mean you can smash white belts, but in a nice way, like in a way that they're not feeling uncomfortable. You don't ever want anyone to feel as if they're in danger or they're getting hurt. There's a difference between rolling hard and then rolling dangerously. And I think that's the thing that people need to pick up on. And again, that comes from the higher belts. There's a lot of responsibility that comes from being a higher level grappler. You're going to be training with people and you have the ability to really hurt them. And I feel like there has to be trust. You have to roll with people in a way where they never feel as if you're going to take advantage of that and actually put them in harm's way.
Okay. And just to close this section, how would you see, well, you're now our jiu-jitsu coach in Iron Valor, how would you see the program progressing in the next 3 months, 6 months down the line?
So I think that with any new jiu-jitsu gym, really for me, I think the main goal is creating a community and a core group of people who are showing up to classes, starting to get something out of it. You know, you can have aspirations to be like a successful competitive gym or be creating black belts or creating world champions or whatever it is, but that's all built on top of the community that you build. And I feel like the stronger that community can be, the better everything else is on top of that. So I would say that what I would like to see for the jiu-jitsu program at Iron Valor is that it just continues to grow in terms of, you know, getting a bigger timetable so that people can grapple more often, getting to the stage where people see it as being a big part of their life. Like, so I know for myself, I know probably for you, like, jiu-jitsu becomes a really big part of your life. It's something that is always with you, and it's something that you always have to, okay, I'm not having a great day, can't wait to get into the gym, it's going to clear my head, it's going to make me feel better. And I think having that for more people is always good.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for our episode today. Happy to have you here and hope that we can keep growing this program together.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.